All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our live webinar again. I want to say before we get started, we could run into some technical difficulties. Our internet has been coming and going this morning. Mediacom is working on the problem, so we're hoping that they have it fixed. We thank you for joining us this morning. We're going to go ahead with the webinar. If for some reason it gets interrupted, hang in there. We'll try to reload. If for some reason it doesn't work, then we will record this and we'll be filling in the blanks for you and send you a file after the presentation should be over. So hopefully everything will work fine and we won't have that problem. I want to welcome Senator Will Kraus. Senator, thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Senator Kraus has been the father of the first income tax cut that we had since the 1920s. He's been involved in every tax issue. We'll talk about some of those here in a little bit, and been a great friend to business over that entire span of his career. You started in the House in 2004, I believe.
I was elected in 2004, took office in 05.
In 05. And then in 2010, you moved to the Senate. Mm-hmm. Since he's been in the Senate and elected to the Ways and Means chairmanship, you followed Chuck Ferguson, I think, in that role.
I did.
And Senator Ferguson, how you say it, a great guy, but he had some interesting positions on things sometimes, and sometimes he would use his position both as Ways and Means chair and then also as head of the oversight type committee, sometimes to tie up and think more about legislation. Senator Kraus came in and just, really took the fetters off of that committee and allowed the committee to operate and to try to work on behalf of businesses. So we thank you very much for that. Pardon me. So let's talk about some of the things that you've done. Mm-hmm. And we go back, you said we mentioned the first one that you had.
You talking about the unemployment?
Yes, the unemployment.
I was part of 4 senators that didn't want to expand the federal unemployment from 79 weeks to 99 weeks. Right. And because we were filibustering and stopping that extension, because I own a business and I've hired people before, and I will tell you that as a business owner, I'm not likely to hire somebody that was on unemployment for almost 2 years.
Right.
So I was thinking that this is not helping our economy. This was hurting our economy, and it was federal dollars, but I just didn't think it was the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. So there's 4 of us that held it up, and then because we held it up, the chamber and other business groups came to us and said, "Hey, if would you sit down if we reduce the unemployment number of weeks from 26 weeks to 20 weeks?" And we said yes. And this is something that I believe you are part of trying to
Absolutely.
do prior to this,
mm-hmm.
And the Democrats wouldn't allow it to happen.
That's right.
And because of our filibuster, we were able to get the weeks down to 20 weeks maximum for employers in the state of Missouri. We thought that was a big win for Missouri businesses, and we were able to sit down, and we did get the 20 additional weeks for the temporary time, and it went away, but the permanent cut from 26 weeks to 20 weeks right. is in effect, and it's very important. Now, since then, Senator Kehoe has passed in a bill that makes it flexible based on the unemployment rate, which right. I was glad to support and thought that was a great innovative idea that Senator Kehoe, working with other businesses, came up with.
Right, and we were very involved in that. We were involved in the override, and thank you for your help with the override too.
Yep.
For those of you who didn't follow that.
Governor Nixon vetoed it, and we had to come back and override that in a veto session. It's interesting that Governor Nixon is the most overridden governor in the history of the state of Missouri.
He really is. And we had the override vote in the House during regular session. There was nothing in the Constitution that prohibited the Senate from overriding during the veto session. So we worked with the Senate, and they put it up in the veto session, and it passed. And so we overrode the governor's veto in the veto session. The Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that. And there's nothing in the Constitution that says you can't do that. But they voided that after going through veto overrides in both chambers. So we had to start again. Now we have a bill pending again. Senator Kehoe's doing it again this year. And we're going to try again to do that. And essentially what it does, it adjusts the rate based on the unemployment rate. That determines the number of weeks of unemployment you get. But it also corrects a very important problem right now. And that is, if you get a severance package, you're able to collect unemployment right now from day one, where you shouldn't be able to collect that unemployment till after your severance package runs out. And that's a problem that we address in that bill. New York's even fixed that problem. Missouri's one of the last to fix that problem, so it's one of the places where you can really game the system. Let's talk for a minute about apportionment. This is something that a lot of companies that are on the webinar today will understand, because this affected their corporate income tax revenue. And essentially what apportionment is how you calculate how much income is going to be taxed in the state of Missouri versus other places. And you helped us passing that first one that affected, we thought, everything. The Department of Revenue limited it to those that sell goods, tangible personal property. And that bill passed in 2013. That was a great bill for businesses located in the state of Missouri that sell on a national basis. So all of our manufacturers here, very important. And we thank you very much for that.
Very glad that we were able to get that done. It was a Sandy Crawford bill, House Bill 128 that I carried in the Senate.
Right.
And then we followed it up after the interpretation of the Department of Revenue and Governor Nixon to being just basically manufacturing. And then we followed it up with Senate Bill 19, which actually sponsored that it made it clear that it would apply to every business in the state of Missouri.
That's right. And again, that's another situation where the Department of Revenue then jumped in, and after the legislature had acted, they said, no, we aren't going to go as far as what the legislature wanted to go. We've had a bunch of those. And in fact, you've focused a lot of your legislative career now, unfortunately, trying to correct things the Department of Revenue's done, and even having press conferences talking about people in your district and others that have, the gyms.
So I had a gymnastic gym, and he was collecting sales tax on gym memberships, but not on gymnastic lessons.
Right.
And so they audited him, and he came in and said, you owe a significant amount of money. It was close to somewhere around $200,000. And obviously, most small businesses would potentially be put out of business with that amount of money. And so what we did is we filed numerous bills to try to correct that. Now he went on, his was already done, so that was something that the Department of Revenue had to work out with him. But the bills that we passed, notification was one of the most important. If the Department of Revenue changes the way they're interpreting the law, or the Supreme Court does, and the Department of Revenue is then going to implement something based on the Supreme Court ruling, they have to notify businesses. Right. And so that actually took effect last year when they notified a number of businesses on delivery charges. Right. Because in 2015, the Supreme Court ruled that potentially you had to, not necessarily was delivery charges exempt from sales tax. That's right. That's the wording that they used.
And they put in the letter 5 or so conditions, and then it was up to each business to decide if they should charge sales tax on shipping charges or not. All taxpayers want is a firm answer. So we had a meeting here. We invited the NFIB, the Chamber, the Trucking Association, all of our businesses came in and met in our basement with the Department of Revenue over the summer, Senator. They came in, and so we wanted some guidance on both the IBM issue, how they were going to handle that IBM MasterCard issue, and the shipping charges. They came in and they said, well, we sent a letter to everyone on the shipping charges, and you just have to look at the letter and decide whether or not it applies. And there are some crazy qualifications in there. If the seller has any benefit from the shipping charges at all, then it's subject to sales tax. Well, if you think about it, we're afraid that they could take that to a really bizarre conclusion and say if you are shipping into a certain zone and you have one rate for that entire zone, that means in some of those cases you're getting a benefit of a lower rate than you would otherwise be charged. And so the seller has a benefit, so that should be subject to sales tax, when otherwise you don't even get any real benefit out of it. Little tricks like that are things that have got the Department of Revenue their reputation over the last several years of really gouging taxpayers. You've taken a number of steps, including the interim committees that have been meeting trying to talk about Department of Revenue process, and you're a member of that committee as well.
I am, and I also chair the Joint Committee on Tax Policy, which is a committee that can bring the Department of Revenue in front of the committee and ask them some questions. We really haven't used that committee too much because we have had some interim committees, and we right now are undergoing, and I'm part of the committee, I'm not chairing this one, is the Tax Study Commission that Randy Hilger he's a CPA that is chairing, which I'm really glad that he took on that role, because that's a pretty big task to look at all the tax different policies. He's doing a great job on that. Created subgroups, and they're meeting and looking into the different things. And so we've got basically this year to come up with a report. Now I'm also on a committee that the new Governor Greitens just announced to look at how we can make our taxes more fair and simple and lower for taxpayers. So I'm looking forward to seeing who he's going to put in charge of that committee. There's 3 members from the Senate, 3 members from the House, and the governor's got 4 appointments for there. And I don't think that he's made his appointments yet. Right. So I'm kind of waiting to see who the chair is and when we're going to get going on that. But that one actually has to have a report to the governor by June, I believe.
June, that's right. And that's going to really focus on tax credits too, and see which ones are functioning well, which ones are not. Maybe suggest ways to revise those. And so we appreciate your work. Of course, the IBM MasterCard case, that's something that came down, for those who have not tuned in before, April 5th of last year. The Missouri Supreme Court issued a decision, the IBM MasterCard case. This was a situation where they were purchasing computers to use for data processing. There have been several Supreme Court decisions that have indicated that they probably should be exempt on that. So they had taken an exemption on that machinery and equipment, filed a refund claim. The Department of Revenue disagreed with that. They took it to court. Actually, the IBM MasterCard folks won at the AHC level, the Administrative Hearing Commission level, and that was a very well thought out decision. The commissioner went through the history of all of the Supreme Court cases, from Bridge Data to Concord Publishing, DST on forward, did a nice thorough analysis of all those decisions and a very well reasoned affirmation then of the company's refund claim. The Department of Revenue challenged that, went to the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court issued a decision that I don't think even the Department of Revenue was expecting. And they not only denied MasterCard the ability to purchase this equipment exempt for their data center that they were providing financial services with, they also threw into question whether you could rely on a 20-year-old case, Southwestern Bell, and all of the other cases that had come both before that and after.
They actually threw out Bell 1 and Bell 2,
That's
which
right.
were earlier Supreme Court rulings, which really put a lot of businesses in a backspin because they qualified. And at the end of last year, we weren't able to work with the Department of Revenue to come up with a bill because we got this in April.
That's right.
Start of May. So we had only a couple weeks left. So we worked really hard to try to get something done to where we put a stay or a pause or a phase to where nothing would happen for a year to give us an opportunity to look at a solution. And so we're in the next legislative session and we're still not sure. We've got a new governor and we don't have a new Department of Revenue director yet. So we're working through, and I think that I've come up with a way of a two-bill approach. And I'm doing this because the Department of Revenue hasn't given us clear guidance on exactly what would work. You would think that just basically putting, I'm trying to think what the terminology is, but putting the case that they just ruled out, abrogating that case would work. But the Department of Revenue says, nope, not necessarily the case. If you abrogate that case, then
just bring another one.
We may have a situation where somebody benefits that didn't benefit before. So what we're doing is we're doing a definitional change for telecommunications in one bill, and then we're abrogating in another bill. And we're willing to put some language in the abrogating bill. It basically clarifies that this doesn't apply to anybody that didn't get the benefit before the court ruling. And we haven't gotten word back from the Department of Revenue yet if that's going to actually make them feel comfortable with the second bill. But we want to make sure that we get something done, and we know the definitional changes would clarify for the telecommunications side of the house.
Right, and we've got, not just telecoms, we've got data centers, we've got others that are relying on that whole list of decisions. And the senator's been great about working with us, and we're continuing to work with the governor's office. The Department of Revenue is kind of a wild card right now because they do not have a director. And so a lot of the people who were driving the decision to take this to court to begin with are still in power there. So we're working with the governor's office to try to work on a solution. Of course, we view this as an overreach by the Supreme Court. This is something that they should never have overruled those previous decisions. And really they didn't. They just drew them into question. So taxpayers really don't know what the Department of Revenue is going to do with the exemptions they've already taken. They could come in and hit them with an audit, and thankfully they were willing to put it on hold to wait and see what the legislature did. And you've been great about working with us. We appreciate that on the solution. Continuing to work on that, we think that maybe the cleanest thing to do is to abrogate that decision and affirm all of those previous decisions that all the taxpayers relied on. And then you just reset the clock to where it was before then. And you give the court very clear guidance that all of those previous cases are what the legislature meant. We believe that that's the case anyway, because the legislature has been in, thanks to you and others, we've been in those statutes every year. Right. We've never taken away the exemptions that were there because the Supreme Court had helped rule that those things, including telecommunications, data processing, and others, were treated as manufacturing. So For the Supreme Court to issue this decision, it was really kind of an off-the-wall decision. I'll tell you another thing that's kind of interesting. A lot of people don't know. Senator knows, but a lot of people don't know. The Supreme Court justice that wrote the opinion that drew into question the Southwestern Bell decision in April of this last year was the justice that wrote the dissenting opinion in Southwestern Bell when it happened earlier. So now she is in the majority. Justice Stith is now in the majority, and she's the one who wrote this majority opinion. That is unfortunate that a senator or that a Supreme Court justice would do that. But you can see the court has changed. It maybe was leaning this way for a while. Now it's pulled over this way. So we have to be very clear with this Supreme Court, and not just with this Department of Revenue. It would be pretty easy probably to get an administrative fix with this Department of Revenue, have this administration agree to treat these things as they always have been and not have any immediate danger. And, failing all else, we could do that. The problem is coming after that Department of Revenue. What happens after this Department of Revenue changes administrations? And that happens even more often than a governor. The average life expectancy of a Department of Revenue director is about 2.8 years. So they don't last even a full term usually on average. So this is something that we want to fix going forward, make it very clear for the Department of Revenue because they're trying to do their job and do the right thing. Make it very clear for the Supreme Court so that they know what the legislature meant, and make it very clear so that businesses can rely on this. And this is something that is an attractive thing for our businesses to be able to say that we can have this exemption. And it's one of the things that makes Missouri attractive for data centers and other things that locate here. So thank you so much for your work on that. Anything else you want to talk about in terms of, and I want to also say, I forgot to mention at the beginning, if you have questions you'd like to ask the Senator, there's a chat box over on the right-hand side of your screen. Please type in your questions, and Haley will get those to us, and we'll be sure and ask the Senator those questions. So if you have questions, please type them in now. Anything else you want to add on maybe the change in the dynamics now in the House and the Senate, the supermajorities and the governor being a Republican?
I think this year is being a historic year. We've already passed right to work. The governor signed that into law, so we're the 28th state. That's going to definitely help Missouri businesses and the opportunity for the companies that were flying over Missouri, not even looking at us. And then we're also working on the labor reform and legal reform are the two areas that we have not been able to do anything on with the previous administration. This governor has come on board and said, hey, we need to do some things to improve the business sector and how we're going to be able to attract more opportunities for businesses and jobs in our state. And this is, as much as we talk about business, I am a person that believes that businesses if we create an atmosphere that's conducive for businesses, they will create the jobs. So this is really about jobs, more jobs at higher pay for Missourians, than it is just about being business friendly. And we're in a nice business environment here where a lot of people want to talk about business, but that's really what it's about. It's about the jobs for Missourians. And I believe that we're going to be able to do more for Missouri by rising all tides and all boats go up when we have more opportunity, because then more Missourians will actually come to Missouri. We have actually fallen behind other states based on our congressional delegation. If you look back 40, 50 years ago, we had 16 congressmen in Washington, D.C. Today we have 8. In our neighboring state of Tennessee had 8 and now has 9. So they have increased their delegation. We have decreased our delegation. So that just shows to you that we have fallen farther and farther behind other states and neighboring states. So what we need to do is get people to move to Missouri. And that means if we have the jobs, they'll move to Missouri. And when we have more Missourians, we'll have more tax revenue, so that we'll be able to do more things for Missouri and raise the revenue for education and other important infrastructure needs.
Right. And that's exactly right. And the right to work issue is so important because if you are not a right to work state, many companies will not even look at you. And you're exactly right. They flew right over Missouri. They would go to other right to work states, and we would never even know what we were missing out on. And that's very sad for us to be in that position. Now we're not. We're the 28th right to work state. Now the unions immediately filed a referendum type petition. If they get the signatures, and they have to get 5% of the registered voters, I think, in each of the congressional districts, and it's around 90,000 votes, but it's spread out over those 5 congressional districts.
They only need 5. You said 5? I thought they needed 6.
Okay, maybe
I thought it was 6 of the 8.
Okay, maybe it's 6
maybe
of the 8.
Maybe it's the 5 of the 8.
I don't know, but whatever it is, it does spread it out a little bit. So it's not just the urban areas that will be voting on this. And I think So that may be a little difficult for them, but assuming they're able to get those votes, that would refer it then to the voters, and it would not go into effect in August like it's supposed to. It would be delayed until the election.
Well, they have until a certain time next year.
Yeah,
So
August 28th.
they have okay.
That's their deadline. If they don't have the signatures by August 28th, it goes into effect, which is great.
That's a short amount of time for them to get the signatures.
It is, but it's sad that we're even put in that position, because this is something that really, on an economic development basis, we're losing out to those other 27 states right off the bat. As you mentioned, tax environment, very important, but so is tort. And the tort environment. You guys are doing a lot this year and helping us with many different tort reform issues. So thank you for that.
Wow. Like I said, we've passed some of this in the past.
The employment law reform bill you passed on discrimination, making sure we align those discrimination standards with the federal standards. Governor vetoed it twice, I think.
So, we now have a governor that's going to sign this legislation. So it's a great environment for Missouri businesses and those that want to be looking at Missouri to come here. I've always said that three things that we need to make Missouri more business friendly is labor reform, legal reform, and tax reform.
Right.
We've been able to hit tax reform in various different ways, but the other two, we've continued to just get to the governor and he's vetoed it. Even though we have supermajorities, those two groups, labor and the trial attorneys, have been able to pick off and pull certain members, and we've not had supermajorities on those issues to be able to override the governor on those issues. That's
right, and that's been a problem for us year after year, and we're very thankful Governor Greitens is very supportive of you all getting that fixed. Let's talk for a second about the governor. The governor has been more involved than the previous governor. A big complaint with Governor Nixon was that he never came down and interacted with the legislature at all, even with people in his own party. And you heard a lot of that on the Senate floor from a certain senator about how the governor just did not interact. It seems like this governor is more willing to engage with the legislature, and some people like that, some people don't.
So I will say that I don't think I ever saw Governor Nixon in the Senate chambers. Before Governor Greitens was even sworn in, he came to the swearing in of the Senate, which happens about a week before he's sworn in. So we've already seen him in the Senate, and we'll see him more. And I've heard that he sometimes walks the halls of the Capitol in the evening. And someone said that they were working in their Capitol office, and he showed up and said hello. And so he said he's got an open door. We've actually used that open door once. A number of senators wanted to go down and talk to him about some budget issues, and he took our meeting. So I think that he's going to be a much more active governor than the previous administration.
And he's building a really good team. He has Janae Newstad as his legislative director. He has Todd Scott, who used to serve in the Senate or served senators as a legal consultant there. He's doing consult, I think, both with the policy work as well as the legislative work. And Will Scharf, very sharp guy. Very impressed with him. He's formerly Brian Cave, now working in the governor's office. Very intelligent and sharp guy, and very willing to talk about things that are pro-business. So we're very, very happy about that. Any questions, Haley, that anybody's typed in? I want to thank you, Senator, for being with us today. I want to thank you for all your hard work. And I know this is really just the beginning, because we are really starting down a path this year where it's going to take a lot of work between the business community and the legislature to make sure we get this language right, and we tell the Supreme Court and the Department of Revenue exactly what we want them to do on the IBM MasterCard issue. And a lot of jobs, as you mentioned, are at stake. If we lose these exemptions, this is not something that would bode very well for us, because the way data centers and communication companies are run now, you do not have to be located in any particular place. You can be located, in another state very easily. And so we thank you for that. I also cannot thank you enough for working in our business income deduction into that tax cut in Senate Bill 509. That's something that directly helps all of our businesses that are not corporations, that are S corporations. It affects about 95% of businesses out there. And then lowering the rate also helps those businesses. So if we ever get to a point where we have a governor that will actually and I believe we do now, have a governor that will actually let the revenues of the state grow to the point where we can have that cut, then perhaps we'll see that. Something we didn't talk about, is Governor Nixon, one of his parting shots as he was going out the door, In June of this last year, he issued more than $131 million more in refunds in June than he had the previous year. So the state was on track to enact the tax cut that you helped pass through the legislature. We were on track to enact that. Then he issued that extra amount of refunds. And that did two things that I think we didn't really talk about much. One of the things was it stopped us from being able to get that tax cut because the revenues then, the net revenues were not as high as they needed to be. But it also started this year with a shortfall. And that is leading to, that's part of the shortfall that they're counting this year, where now everybody's, screaming bloody murder and they're cutting the budget and everyone's relying on these estimates. What we've been talking about the last couple of weeks, I'll share with you, Senator, is that the two big sources of revenue, as you know, are individual income tax revenues, which usually don't come in if you have to pay until mid-April,
right?
And sales and use tax revenues. And of course, Christmas season just happened, and those returns were just due January 31st. So they're just now starting to see those sales tax receipts. When we see the numbers for February, that'll come out early March, then we'll have a better idea of what the sales tax part of that is. That's about half of the budget revenues. The other half won't really be known until April. So we understand the governor withholding money. That's a responsible thing to do based on the numbers that are facing them now. But we would also caution not to get too worked up over the revenue shortfall because it may or may not actually materialize. Part of it is created by the previous governor accelerating those refunds. And then part of it is we don't know what those revenues are going to be. When economists see any kind of downturn, they apply that to everything and extrapolate it. And, I think they're getting a little nervous over nothing. I could be completely wrong. Right. And the governor has to be right. So withholding the money makes sense. But as we go through the budget cycle, they will learn more. You will learn more about the revenues as that goes on. And of course, the budget doesn't have to be done until the first week in May.
That's right.
So,
well, it brings up one of the bills that I sponsored in this year, and it actually is being rolled into Andrew Koenig's bill. That would be the elimination of the corporate income tax. Andrew doesn't eliminate it; he reduces it based on reforming some tax credits. Right. And his bill actually has a positive fiscal note. But I keep telling people, here's the thing. In the state of Missouri last year, we brought in $280 million from corporate income tax. 3.2% of our net general revenue came from corporations. I believe we can have an advantage right here in the state of Missouri by eliminating corporate income tax for very little, a little over 3% of our budget. And think about the marketing we could do. If you watch CNBC, you see that New York State is advertising 10 years free taxes for corporations. So I just think that this is an opportunity for us. Now, I rolled it into Andrew's, and I let Andrew have the lead on that because his bill is a positive fiscal note because of the reforming of tax credits. And I think that that's a way that we could do something with the actual corporate income tax rate and bring it down. We do have a relatively low rate already at 6.25. Right. But since it's not a big portion of our revenue, I just think it's an opportunity for us to market Missouri and get more businesses and more corporations.
We agree with you. And the way that the bills have been structured, we like too, because it reduces and then leaves those statutes in place. One of the fears that we had is, we've discussed before, is that some states have done away with their income tax and then they come back with something else that's very similar to an income tax. So Texas has a margins tax that applies to profit. Michigan and Ohio both eliminated their income tax and have this special hybrid tax. It's kind of a gross receipts tax, kind of an income tax, not really an income tax. And the problem with that is that companies then don't know what rules to play under. We have a long set of cases that deal with income taxes, corporate income taxes, and how they apply in different states. We don't have that same line of cases with these hybrid taxes. So we thank you for that. And leaving those statutes in place is very important rather than just repealing them, and making sure if in the future, which of course it would never happen in Missouri, if they decided that they needed more money and they wanted to get it from business, at least there would be a framework there to work within. And we think that's a good way to do it. Well, I want to thank you very much. Any questions yet, Haley?
No.
I want to thank you very much, Senator, for being with us. You are our second live guest on this, excluding our wonderful lobbying staff. And we appreciate you being on this program.
Well, Ray, we appreciate you coming and testifying in front of the Ways and Means Committee and all the work that you're doing to help Missouri businesses and bring Missouri in line with being a business-friendly state so we can create more jobs for Missourians.
We're very happy to do that. And thank you very much, Senator, for your help.